This story of Lazarus tends to be a favorite among Christians. You might be familiar with it, very familiar, or you might not. The entire story really does take up the entire chapter. So let me know what you think when you go home and read the entire thing. It's beloved in part because the story is so layered. Jesus is told that his friend is ill and his presence is requested, and yet he doesn't leave right away. Curious. He arrives after his friend is already dead, and understandably, the sisters are very mad at Jesus about this. Even though he is going to raise Lazarus from the dead, he still weeps at the tomb. And then, after praying to God, he actually does it. He does this outrageous thing by calling Lazarus to come out. And he does. You know, I liked the artwork that was chosen for the one parish, one prisoner image of this story, because when you just Google Lazarus images, there's a lot of really disturbing or bad art around this story of the resurrection of Lazarus. At the worst, it just looks like a mummy coming out of a cave. A lot of the Middle Eastern art is extremely dark, and Lazarus is very corpse-like. It's very festive getting into fall, really, as it were. So now that I think of it, fitting for our season. And we didn't read to the end of the chapter, but this story of resurrection is really the last straw for the religious leadership that is terrified of Jesus, terrified, and decides that he's better off dead. This story is pretty climactic when it comes to John's gospel. Another reason why this story is so popular is because it faces the reality of death. Oh yeah, I'm sure that's why we all like it. The death part, that's really what is attractive. But really, that's what this is a story about. That's what we see here, the reality of death. And yet we know that the story does not end there. Death is real, yes, but so is resurrection. So the questions that the sisters ask in this text are the questions that we all ask when we are experiencing loss and suffering. Where are you, God? Where were you when death was imminent? Why were you not here? I'm mad at you, Lord. I'm disappointed. I'm angry. I'm sad. Jesus comes face to face with the reality of his friend's grief, and it brings him to tears. Aren't these the questions we ask in the face of suffering? Where is God when there is death? Where is God when bad things happen? This text is rich because it has all the good drama. I'm talking accusation, lament, grief, faith, hurt, blame, hope. And the hope of this story is that Jesus works with people where they're at to move through their grief and find expression. When Mary and Martha are disappointed in Jesus, they tell him to his face, and he receives it. He listens, and he responds. Jesus is confronting the place where death is real. And there's no masking the reality that death is real. In this story, as it is in our lives. We all know that. We know the deaths that occur from ongoing war around the world, from gun violence on our streets and in our schools, from assassinations of politicians, and even just this week, Charlie Kirk being shot and killed. This was the day before the 24th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks on the Twin Towers. Can you believe it's been 24 years? We know the effects of fires, of floods. We know all of this. We are not strangers to it. We know how death touches lives and the ripple effects that are felt far and wide and are passed down from generation to generation. And so Jesus faces the accusation that his friends are saying to his face. He hears the grief of his friends, and he goes to the tomb. And when he speaks, it's at that moment, really, that Jesus goes far beyond what any of us are really capable of doing. This is where Jesus truly shows his power, what he alone can do in the face of death. We as Christians, we can minister to the Marthas. We can weep with the Marys in our midst. Sometimes we are the Martha. Sometimes we are the Mary. Sometimes we are comforting those around us. But Jesus alone is the one who can speak to the dead and expect them to hear. Lazarus, come out. This is the gift that only Christ can give. Not only is Jesus calling Lazarus to emerge from the tomb, but he calls all of those who have died in body or spirit to come out of the tomb. Come out of the tombs of our own making. Death is real, but not final. Death is not actualized in this moment of resurrection. Jesus has and will always have the final word. We live with the reality of death, but our hope, and friends, this is a gritty hope. This is a stubborn hope. And I know some of y'all are stubborn, so, it takes one to know one, right? This is a stubborn hope. This is a stubborn hope in this promise that we live by, that what is real now is not final. It is not the end. This is a promise that only God can give, that Jesus has the power over death and destruction, that calls us out of the tomb. Today we learned the name of our new friend through the One Parish, One Prisoner program, who is going to be released from prison on Thursday. In many ways, being released from prison is a form of resurrection. It's an emerging from the tomb of imprisonment and an invitation back out into the world and into new life. Our criminal justice system is not designed for this to be easy. People are often released from prison with few resources, few connections, and are expected to build lives often from scratch. It can be intimidating uphill battle for so many. So our role as those who journey alongside our new friend is to be a source of support and friendship, encouragement, and prayer. We are to walk with him as he journeys through resurrection, hearing Jesus call his name from the tomb and inviting him back into life. Earlier in the Gospel of John, we hear Jesus say, "The time is coming when all who are in their graves will hear God's voice." And then right before this, in chapter 10, Jesus tells the disciples that God calls God's sheep by name and leads them out. Just as Jesus cries out, "Lazarus, come out," so does Jesus call our names, calling us forth into resurrection from our self-made tombs of death and destruction. We are given new opportunities, new lives, where Jesus alone is the source of our healing and our restoration. So what is the tomb that Jesus is calling you out of today? Where is the darkness that Jesus is pulling you from? Our world is one of the tomb. Death and darkness all around us. And yet we trust that the Spirit of the living God, the one who calls us out, who calls us forth, who is the source of all resurrection. Death is real, but it's not final, my friends. It does not have the final word. Only Jesus Christ has that. Lazarus, come out. Thanks be to God. Amen.